We are 1 week into Donald Trump's term, and there is a lot to cover, so let's just get right into the news of the week. Donald Trump signed over 200 executive orders, which, according to Time magazine, mirrored Project 2025. Trump's early actions mirror Project 2025, the blueprint he once dismissed. President Donald Trump made clear during his campaign that he wanted little to do with Project 2025, the sweeping and controversial conservative policy blueprint created by the Heritage Foundation. But just days into his second term, many of Trump's early actions align with the Project 2025 agenda. An analysis by Time found that nearly 2/3 of the executive actions Trump has issued so far mirror or partially mirror proposals from the 900-page document, ranging from sweeping deregulation measures to aggressive immigration reform. So let's talk about what some of it looks like when Project 2025 actually gets implemented. So far, Donald Trump has ended funding for cancer research, causing labs to shut down. Trump abruptly cancels crucial science reviews at NIH, world's largest public funder of biomedical research. President Trump has placed an indefinite suspension on research grant reviews and travel at the National Institutes of Health and appears to have erased diversity programming pages at the agency's website. Confusion and anxiety is rippling through the U.S. health research community this week following Donald Trump taking office as the 47th president. His administration has abruptly canceled research grant reviews, travel, and trainings for scientists inside and outside the National Institutes of Health, the world's largest public biomedical funder. Adding to the worry, the Trump team appears to have deleted entire web pages about diversity programs and diversity-related grants from the agency's site. Because, not only did he have an executive order defunding the National Institutes of Health, he had an executive order ending all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the entire federal level. He also made a declaration and an executive order that there are only two genders. He pulled us out of the World Health Organization, which makes us, I think, the only country in the world, except for maybe Liechtenstein, that is not a part of the WHO. And he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, again, which Biden put us back into after the last time Trump was president. He also ended the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, which was a civil rights era law protecting federal employees against discrimination based on race, sexuality, gender, religion. He also did a hiring freeze at multiple government agencies, including FEMA. So people who were literally in the process of being hired have lost jobs because of him. He ended the Biden-era rule that allows Medicare and Medicaid to negotiate drug prices, which effectively brought the price of insulin, Ozempic, a bunch of other drugs way down. He ended Biden's executive order on offshore drilling. He officially, according to the United States, changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and Mount Denali to Mount McKinley. He ended funding for the infrastructure bill and is planning on reallocating those funds and reallocating all that effort to crypto and AI, which he is currently selling to billionaires from around the world, including Saudi Arabia and Dubai. He declared a national emergency on the southern border and had a fun little photo op where actual enlisted Marines went down to the border with their helicopters and their tanks to essentially stand around and do nothing, I assume. He changed immigration control enforcement rules so that ICE can now enter schools, churches, and hospitals. I'll talk a lot more about that, all of these things, because there are extreme consequences to every single executive order that he issued, and we need to talk about them. He also signed an executive order ending birthright citizenship. A federal judge has blocked that, but the GOP Congress is drafting legislation to dismantle the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Oh, and the 22nd Amendment, which says that a president can only serve 2 terms. He pardoned Russ Ulbricht, who created the Silk Road, which is an online website, dark web nonsense, that essentially turned into a drug and sex trafficking site. He was sentenced to life in prison, and Trump pardoned him. And he also pardoned 1,500 January 6th insurrectionists, some of whom were charged with violently beating police officers, assault on cops. They were charged with seditious conspiracy. Some of these men were sentenced to over 20 years in prison. They are out. Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, is out of prison, and he was actually at Trump's recent rally in Vegas. He gave Stuart Rhodes a VIP seat at his rally because, the leader of his militia better have a comfy seat. Speaking of the January 6th pardons, pretty much a day after the pardons happened, one guy was already rearrested on a gun crime. Man pardoned for role in January 6th attack, rearrested on federal gun charges. Daniel Ball granted clemency by Trump over riot-related offenses, but remains in jail under separate gun charge. This was a gun charge from before he was arrested for the Capitol riot, he got pardoned, and they were like, no, you also have this other charge we're going to arrest you for and detain you for. But that just goes to show, Trump is always talking about migrant crime and how terrible it is. But, all these guys are criminals. Most of them have violent crimes in their past. Maybe not most of them, because a lot of them were just, weird cultists who got swept up in the whole thing. But a lot of them were violent criminals. He's even talked about inviting them to the White House. And Stuart Rhodes, I think, was, at the Capitol eating in one of the cafeterias. And at the Tax on Tips rally, or no Tax on Tips rally. We'll talk about that, too. Donald Trump pretty much spent the entire campaign screaming about immigrants and how they're all criminals. So in the same week that he releases 1,500 violent criminals from prison and pardons a bunch of people for a terrorist insurrection on the United States Capitol, he is now doing raids of workplaces and allowing raids of schools, churches, and hospitals to go after immigrants because he claims they're the real criminals. A U.S. Army vet got swept up in a raid in Newark, New Jersey. There was a story of ICE going in, trying to get into a school, and the teachers stopping them. It turned out it was Secret Service trying to get to the school to talk to an 11-year-old who posted some anti-Trump stuff online. But they posed as ICE. They presented ICE credentials, is what the teachers were saying, the people that stopped them, to try and get into this classroom, basically. Trump is also flying migrants out on military planes. Each flight is costing around $900,000, which migrant flights, deporting people, happens all the time, but they don't usually use these massive military planes. And he's just doing it for the photo op, which is obvious if you go on to their social media, the White House social media page. They have all these flashy pictures of migrants being put on these planes, and it's effective for the straw man look. This is on the White House Instagram page. Promises made, promises kept. Deportation flights have begun. And it's a bunch of migrants being hauled onto a giant jet, shackled together. This must slap if you're a stupid person. Trump's first deportation flights, with average of just 80 migrants, cost up to $852,000 per trip. As a part of his ongoing effort to carry out mass deportations throughout the country, President Donald Trump has employed the use of Department of Defense resources to return many migrants to their home countries. Publicly available data suggests that using U.S. military planes to fly migrants out of the country may be significantly more expensive than flights chartered by the Department of Homeland Security. Obviously, the cost of these flights is the least horrifying aspect of the whole thing, but, it's just the cherry on top. He's just doing this for show. 80 people is going to cost the country $1 million. Be so for real, Trump. And all these attacks on migrant communities are causing massive backlash. Too little, too late, everybody. But the Catholic Church has been speaking up against the mass deportation flights. The Pope even spoke up against these deportation flights and against Trump's immigration plan, which again, too little, too late, but thanks, I guess. And now the Trump administration is basically at war with the Catholic Church. Tom Homan was speaking up against the Pope. J.D. Vance was on the news today talking about the U.S. bishops and how they need to do better. And he defended the administration's change to ICE rules, allowing them to go into churches.
Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised to do that. And I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
let them talk
support them
about
going into
people like
schools
Laken
and
Riley
churches.
who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether
What J.D. Vance is doing is a white nationalist argument. He and Donald Trump and the entire MAGA movement cannot even imagine, cannot even acknowledge that there are undocumented immigrants in this country who are contributing members of society. They can't wrap their minds around that. And if they even try to think that, they just automatically will say, well, being illegal here is a crime. They don't care about nuance, I guess is my point. It's so much easier to just paint an entire group of people with a wide brush and then say that anybody who has the audacity to stand up for them is protecting criminals. It is fascist, white supremacist brainwashing. Vance had no sympathy for the Afghan refugees who were left behind due to Trump's executive order, which essentially just ended all refugee programs. Thousands of people were stranded at airports as soon as Trump signed that executive order. Spouses of U.S. military, people who worked with the United States during the Afghanistan war, unaccompanied minors trying to get home were stranded, and J.D. Vance had no sympathy for them during this interview. He didn't have sympathy for the migrants coming across the southern border who did it the right way, who were using the CBP One app, which is an app that helps vet them and get them court dates, helps expedite the process, basically. And Trump's executive order ended that app. People, mothers, children were literally just stranded and abandoned. And these people have been waiting, and they've done it the right way. They're going through the process. But they don't care about those people. They're too busy posting basically mugshots of random migrants that they swept up who maybe did or did not commit violent crimes, and they're just posting their pictures all over the internet, just ignoring the women and children and families who were abandoned by a country that said that they would help them. A country some of them fought and had family die for. J.D. Vance uses dehumanizing language to normalize attacks on migrants. Before all this happened, right after the inauguration, Trump went to the inaugural prayer service in Washington, D.C., which was led by Bishop Budd. And she, to Donald Trump's face, gave him some pretty powerful words. And I'll just let her speak because it was profound.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops, and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land. May God grant us the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak the truth to one another in love, and walk humbly with each other and our God for the good of all people in this nation and the world. Amen.
I did a whole other video on her sermon to him, but that's how you handle a fascist. And she has experienced backlash from the MAGA world. A sitting congressman straight up called for her to be deported, added to these deportation flights. That's sitting Congressman Mike Collins saying the person giving this sermon should be added to the deportation list. Like, that is absolutely insane. The Nazis also purged spiritual leaders that spoke up against them. Not only are church leaders speaking up against the administration, foreign countries are too. Mexico has refused certain flights. They've accepted some, but they've refused flights, and the Mexican president spoke out against Trump, calling it the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf of America. Basically talked down to him like he's a freaking toddler, saying that the rest of the world is laughing at him. And today, Sunday the 26th, there was like a tiny trade war between us and Colombia, where Trump threatened 25% tariffs on Colombia, but in his declaration from the White House, he spelled it wrong, spelled it like Columbia University, and they had a back and forth. And essentially, it was about which types of planes that Colombia would accept full of deportees. And Colombia basically backed down. Like, it was a little bit back and forth, threatening each other with tariffs, but Colombia folded. And so now Trump's going to feel emboldened. The whole thing is so stupid and chaotic, but real human lives are being affected. Real people are suffering because of these executive orders. Like, this isn't a game. This isn't like fiction. There are consequences to these actions, vast global consequences. Speaking of global consequences, Elon Musk did a Nazi salute, and the entire world has responded. There was a lot of weird back and forth and controversy for like a day about whether or not this was an actual Nazi salute. And then the next day, he spoke virtually at an AfD conference. AfD is the neo-Nazi party of Germany. They are called Alternative for Germany. And Elon Musk has expressed support for them in the past. I'm going to show you his Nazi salute and then a clip of what he said at the conference, because objectively speaking, he's spewing Nazi rhetoric.
I think there's frankly too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, or even let alone their parents, their great grandparents, maybe even. And we should be optimistic and excited about a future for Germany. And that's really my message: is be optimistic, excited, and preserve German culture.
And it's not just me saying that he's a Nazi. The German media is like censoring what he did because it's illegal there. And an activist group in Berlin responded like this. They projected a still of him doing the salute on the Tesla building in Berlin, and it says Heil Tesla. And if you follow Elon Musk's online presence at all, like, it's pretty obvious. I mean, the man literally uplifts Nazi talking points and propaganda and rhetoric on Twitter. He basically says the 14 words everywhere he goes. Like, I don't know how much more obvious one person can be about their white nationalist feelings. Speaking of Elon Musk, he and Vivek Ramaswamy were supposed to be co-chairing DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Well, Vivek Ramaswamy is out, totally out of the picture. The top lawyer at DOGE was also ousted. And Susan Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, has kicked Elon Musk out of the White House. He doesn't have an office next to Trump anymore. He is in a totally different building now. So there's like a weird civil war continuously happening between Elon Musk and other MAGA folks. But on a global scale, Trump has completely isolated us from all of our allies. Canadian politicians are recommending that people don't travel to the United States from Canada. The European Union, conservative members of the European Union are speaking up against Trump, especially since Elon Musk's little salute. This is Premier of British Columbia David Ebby's response when he's asked whether Canadians should travel to the United States.
Yeah, it's a strange time because we've got friends and family and loved ones over the border. The border for so many Canadians has been a marker of certainly of a different country, but not in the way that borders typically separate countries. We've got so many relationships, and it feels very strange to say, but I really do think that for Canadians right now, and you're planning your March break vacations, when you're planning your summer vacations, if the tariff threat is realized, the deliberate economic attack on families in our province, in our country, by the President of the United States, that we should really be thinking carefully about spending our money in that country. And it's a bit heartbreaking to say it, to tell you the truth, because of our relationships back and forth. I don't understand why the president is doing this. I think it's bizarre. It's not a fight we wanted. It's not a fight we signed up for. But I assure every American, and certainly and especially the president, that Canadians will fight. We will stand up and fight, and that includes making decisions about how we spend our money. And we will not spend money in a country that wants to do economic harm to Canadians. And I think that it'll be a difficult discussion and decision for many people. But I'm sure families are having those conversations because it is such an awful thing the president is trying to do.
And here's a couple responses to Trump's antics from some European leaders.
Yesterday, we witnessed the inauguration of a man whose ideology embodies everything the EU was founded to reject.
To Musk, Zuckerberg and company. In Europe, we have a market of millions of users that provide money to your companies. But we also love protecting our citizens and democracies by making laws. If you don't like it, you can always take your Nazi salutes and your masculine energy and go back home. Viva Europa, hoy más que nunca.
So a certain normalization of terms that we know from this time is unfortunately something
Donald Trump also had a call with Denmark to talk about Greenland. And according to people on the call, he basically threw a temper tantrum when he was told that it's not for sale. And folks who were on the call said that they kind of didn't take it super seriously before talking to him, but they are very serious now. They are acknowledging that he is taking this seriously. He was threatening, he was boisterous, he was angry. They believe that his threats are real, and they fear that he will try to attack Denmark or Greenland.
So not only is the Trump administration destroying relationships with our allies abroad, but he's causing very real and serious problems in the United States. I already talked about the hiring freeze and how it's affecting his own supporters. People who were trying to get jobs had jobs, and now because of the hiring freeze, which was a Project 2025 staple, there are no jobs. He's basically crippled the National Institute of Health from doing anything, and there is a bird flu pandemic sweeping the world right now. Millions of chickens are being killed because they are testing positive for bird flu in the United States. People are already seeing egg shortages, and the prices of eggs are going up, which Trump promised that he was going to lower the price of eggs, but he can't just snap his fingers. And he is effectively silencing scientists and doctors from being able to warn people about the bird flu. 3 of his nominees were confirmed this week. Pete Hegseth was confirmed by the Senate to be the Secretary of Defense. Every single Democrat voted against him, and 3 Republicans voted against him. J.D. Vance had to do the tie-breaking vote, which has pretty much never happened in the history of Secretary of Defense. It's always like 99 to 0, 99 to 1 voting for the Secretary of Defense. It's not normally so bipartisan. Kristi Noem was also confirmed, and I think it was like 8 Democrats voted to confirm her. And Marco Rubio was confirmed, and pretty much all the Democrats voted for him. Because, like, he used to be kind of sane, but obviously he's just another Trump stooge, so big mistake there. Trump's DEI enforcement has caused the U.S. Air Force to remove all lessons about the Tuskegee Airmen. More DEI fallout. Air Force scraps course that used videos of Tuskegee Airmen and female World War II pilots. The Air Force has removed training courses with videos of its storied Tuskegee Airmen and the Women or Air Force Service Pilots, or WASPs, the female World War II pilots who were vital in ferrying warplanes for the military to comply with the Trump administration's crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The videos were shown to Air Force troops as part of DEI courses they took during basic military training. What a slap in the face to veterans. It's just racism. DEI was the racist dog whistle that finally caught the fascist car. And now we get to all suffer because of that. MAGA is also spreading lies that Trump is the reason that the Army Corps of Engineers is in North Carolina. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, "Promises made, promises kept. President Trump has activated the Army Corps of Engineers in Western North Carolina." And she's retweeting some MAGA guy. "I just drove past the Army Corps of Engineers in Western North Carolina." Here's the thing, though. They've been there the entire time. This article is from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website from October. Louisville District continues to support Hurricane Helene recovery in North Carolina. When Hurricane Helene hit North Carolina, it left communities without basic resources and caused significant infrastructure damage, as well as more than 1.5 million cubic yards of debris. From the onset of the storm, members of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Louisville District debris team were mobilized to assist in the massive recovery effort, bringing their expertise in debris removal and disaster response to the forefront. "I originally grew up in McDowell County, and this one hit home for me," said Louisville District Commander Colonel L. Rain Mann. "We're here doing whatever needs to happen to get the people of North Carolina back to a sense of normalcy." It's just another Trump lie that we've got to call out. He is not the reason the Army Corps of Engineers is there. That's insane. Speaking of the hurricanes, Trump basically said this week that he wants to end FEMA and that he wants to condition aid to California based on whether they get voter ID. He stated basically that there will be no aid conditioned on red states because they voted for him, but blue states need to get it together and do what he wants. And Democratic leaders told him no to his face. Democratic representatives went to a roundtable discussion with him and called him out for his divisive language and for conditioning aid or threatening to condition aid.
Policies of California and I know you've talked about policies of California that you're not a fan of, but I've been in Congress for 28 years. I really disagree with Louisiana on their abortion policy. I disagree with them on their campaign finance policy. I disagree with North Dakota on their gun policy. And I would never turn to somebody from Louisiana and say, you keep living on your cousin's couch, because we're not going to help you rebuild until Louisiana agrees with me on a woman's right to choose. So I'm hoping that we can get these funds and that we don't punish individuals for the policies of their state.
Democrats need to continue to do that every opportunity they get. They need to stand up to this man and not capitulate to anything that he does, which some of them are, and that's pissing me off. And while Democrats are having to fight back against attacks on Trump, Republican senators are just trying to make life harder for everybody. Senator Mike Lee is calling to end the TSA and leave it up to airlines to police security. Like, yeah, you want Spirit Airlines in control of making sure nobody's bringing weapons on a plane? Smart. And to wrap all this up, things are probably going to escalate again in the Middle East because Trump has lifted a ban on the 2,000-pound bombs that Biden had frozen, had not allowed Israel to access. Trump is sending those. He also basically said he wants to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime I believe, and I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's over the centuries that's many conflicts that site, and I don't know. It's something has to happen, but. It's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished, and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing in a different location where they can maybe live in peace. Temporarily, or would they? It could be either. It could be temporarily. Could be long term.
He has such a callous disregard for human life, just the way he talks about things. He wants to relocate Palestinians, clean the whole place out, have housing in other countries where they can live, so he can probably build a resort in Gaza. And if you're planning on protesting this, be weary, because Trump has stated that pro-Palestinian protesters, if they are students, if they are foreign students, they will be deported. He is cracking down on Antifa again. And Pete Hegseth, who is the new Secretary of Defense, in his confirmation hearing last week, would not confirm nor deny whether he would shoot protesters in the legs. So yeah, that's week 1 of the Trump presidency. We have rollbacks on civil rights. We have attacks on our allies, highly expensive raids on workplaces and deportations of people, economic threats on our allies, a flurry of executive orders that's dismantling the United States as we know it and taking away rights from people. Trump is a prime example of how it takes decades to build something, to create something, to make change, and a week to destroy it all. Not only has he destroyed civil rights and progress, he has destroyed our future. This week alone is going to cause a ripple effect that won't be fixed for decades. And we have 4 more years of weeks like this. Anyway, thanks for watching. Stay informed.